Have you ever imagined having a conversation with animals? Peter, the talking dolphin. What is the story behind Peter? And the woman in the video, what is her relationship with Peter? The 1960s. The Apollo 11 moon landing marked the beginning of a full-scale research about aliens by many scientists. NASA researchers focused on the potential problems that could occur following an alien encounter. How can we communicate with aliens? Scientists attempted to find the answer in animals rather than humans. Apes, such as chimpanzees and monkeys, were the early candidates for this research, but eventually they settled on dolphins. The key reason was the fact that dolphins' brains, with a highly developed cerebral cortex, are 40% larger than that of humans. In 1963, a Snow White research lab was built on the shores of St. Thomas Island in the Caribbean. It was named the Dolphin House. The purpose of the research was communication between dolphins and humans. Teaching human language to animals and conversing with them was the goal. Scientists thought that interspecies communication would be the first step to communication with aliens. Supported by NASA, the research went smoothly under the guidance of neuroscientist Dr. John Lilly. One day, a woman visited the lab and volunteered to help with the experiment. Her name was Margaret Lovett, and that was when she met Peter, the male dolphin, for the first time. Giving her all to create a connection with Peter, Margaret worked harder than anyone else. As if repaying her in kind, Peter showed remarkable growth. In the span of 10 weeks, he reached a state of being able to imitate human language quite convincingly. This progress brought hope to the research, which led Margaret to make a big decision. She decided to turn the lab facility into her home and live with the dolphins there. Margaret stated that Peter's ability to speak was not the result of forced experimentation, but a beautiful achievement arising from the deep communion and bond shared between her and Peter. She wanted to spend more time with Peter, building an even deeper bond with him. That was how the second floor of the Dolphin House was converted into a communal space where humans and dolphins lived together. Margaret did her paperwork on a desk that hung from the ceiling. Her bed was a mattress she had thrown into the fish tank, allowing her to sleep with Peter. However, there was something unexpected getting in the way. Peter had begun sending sexual signals to Margaret. Peter expressed affection by rubbing himself on Margaret's body. Margaret was deeply conflicted. She put Peter in the female dolphin's tank downstairs in an attempt to relieve his urges, but unfortunately he was only interested in Margaret. Ultimately, she had to make a tough decision. She decided to relieve the male dolphin's sexual desires herself by hand. Margaret later made this statement about the event. "I wasn't uncomfortable with it. It would just become part of what was going on. It seemed to me that it made the bond closer. Also, I did not want to break the bond that we share." To Margaret, this was done purely for research, but to the public eye, that was not the case. At the time, an American adult magazine company, Hustler, reported the story in a very sensational way with the headline, "Extraordinary Sex Between Humans and Dolphins." Moreover, Dr. John Lilly was found to have injected LSD, a psychedelic drug, into the dolphins, putting the Dolphin House on the verge of shutdown overnight. This eventually led NASA to cut their funding, and the experiment was completely put to an end in 1966. As the lab crew went their separate ways, Margaret alone remained by Peter's side. Since she was not a legal owner of Peter, their eventual separation was something inevitable. In the end, Peter was relocated to a cramped water tank in Miami, USA in October of the same year. It was a concrete water tank with little to no sunlight. After a few weeks had passed, Margaret received terrible news from John Lilly himself. It was the news of Peter's death. There was something rather questionable about his death. Unlike humans, a dolphin's every breath is a conscious effort, and they need to come up to the surface regularly for oxygen. But for some reason, it is said that Peter did not come up to the surface to breathe. Even though he was running out of oxygen, he remained at the bottom of the concrete tank, as if waiting for his own death. It is known that suicide is a concept only applicable to humans, who are social animals. The general opinion on animals at the time was that they act strictly to survive. The fact that Peter committed suicide shocked not only the zoology community, but the entire world. Behavioral neuroscientist and dolphin expert Lori Marino stated that animals have the cognitive ability to plan their own suicide. On top of that, dolphins are animals with the highest rate of stranding, a phenomenon of mass suicide. Stranding is a mysterious suicide phenomenon in which marine creatures such as whales, earless seals, and fur seals come ashore on their own, choosing to die. Unusually frequent dolphin mass suicides are reported. The dominant theory at the present is that dolphins, under extreme mental stress caused by powerful sonar signals from submarines and ships, decide to give up their lives on their own. It is said that dolphins that have chosen suicide often end up dying despite being rescued and returned to the ocean, as they have lost the will to live. Citing the stranding phenomenon as an example, there are many opinions revolving around whether Peter had reached his mental limit and committed suicide. Relocating him to a cramped tank was already a problem in itself, but his separation with Margaret, with whom he had spent 6 days of the week with, was simply unbearable for him. Peter's death has sparked harsh criticism from the zoology community. The Dolphin House experiment was a total failure. Peter did not understand the meaning of words. He was forcibly imitating the sounds Margaret made by using his blowhole. Bernd Versig, dolphin behaviorist. 15 years after the closure of the research lab, Dr. John Lilly finally admitted his mistake. He later delivered a public message of opposition to dolphin experiments and shows. To begin with, it was not my right to catch and imprison dolphins for experimentation. I should have simply observed dolphins in the wild. Following Peter's death, Margaret remodeled the Dolphin House into a home for humans and hung the photos of her and Peter there. She married the photographer that took the photos of her and Peter and still lives in that house to this day. After remaining silent about the experiment for more than 50 years, she left this statement in her recent interview with BBC. "If I was sitting with my legs in the water, he would come beside me and gaze at me for a long time, almost as if time had stopped." Dolphins are said to possess notably greater cognitive abilities compared to other animals. Peter the dolphin who loved a human. Perhaps it was when he was thrown away into a cold concrete tank that Peter realized that he was nothing more than an experimental subject. The veterinarian who looked after Peter during the experiment, Andy Williamson, stated, "The result of the experiment at the Dolphin House was different from what was originally planned. It was that dolphins can fall in love with humans, and they can even commit suicide upon separation with the human they love. This dolphin really was madly in love with her." This has been Strange Night.